It began with silence. Not the gentle, drifting kind found in the void between stars, but a strained, breath-holding quiet that stretched across entire civilizations. Every sensor array, every distant outpost, every war-hardened battle group positioned along the fractured borders of the Orion expanse detected the same impossible ripple, an anomaly so precise, so abrupt, that even the machine minds struggled to define its nature. The galaxy had learned to interpret the language of anomalies, for war had become its unwelcome lingua franca. Gravity distortions usually meant fleet jumps. Radiation spikes signaled weapons tests. Spatial shearing marked the coming of superweapons whose names were spoken only by those who expected not to survive them. But this ripple was different. It felt deliberate. It felt final. And somewhere on a forgotten stretch of contested space, where the Citadel armadas and the Dominion swarm had clashed for generations, the frontline combatants sensed an unprecedented presence entering the field. Veteran commanders, forged by decades of unbroken conflict, felt their instincts recoil. Enlisted soldiers, hardened by the brutal mathematics of alien warfare, felt a tremor run through their ranks. Even the autonomous war forms, incapable of fear yet deeply attuned to threat assessment, registered a sudden and exponential increase in projected casualty probabilities. The galaxy realized it had company, uninvited, unknown, and utterly unpredictable. Humanity had arrived. For centuries, humanity had existed as a peripheral rumor whispered through trade channels and diplomatic murmurings, an obscure species content to dwell on the spiral arm's edge, too busy rebuilding themselves from ancient self-inflicted wounds to participate in the grand games of empire. Many outside observers had dismissed them as an emerging people whose time in the galactic arena had not yet come, destined perhaps to remain a curiosity rather than a contender. Others, more wary, had noted their rapid ascension through technological benchmarks and had wondered, quietly, uneasily, how a species with such a turbulent history would behave when the stars inevitably beckoned them outward. Only a few scholars had reviewed humanity's archived broadcasts and emerging space operations with genuine concern, studying a species that had repeatedly overcome extinction-level challenges of its own making. A species that did not merely survive disaster, but learned to weaponize the lessons. A species that understood war not as a temporary aberration, but as a recurring crucible that forged innovation, resilience, and unity under pressure. Still, even those scholars had not predicted this. They had not predicted the warship. They had not predicted the silence. They had not predicted the shift in the battlefield's fate the moment the human vessel breached real space. To the great powers of the Orion expanse, humanity's military development had remained a peripheral matter. Their diplomats had spoken politely but firmly in every assembly, insisting that humanity had no interest in territorial expansion or ideological wars. Their scientific envoys had appeared in neutral sectors, offering medical aid, trade partnerships, and cultural exchange. Their explorers had mapped wild corridors of space not out of conquest, but out of an earnest hunger for understanding. Many galactic leaders had taken these gestures as signs of deference, interpreting restraint as weakness. Yet restraint had never meant incapacity. It had meant choice. And now, as the human warship materialized in the contested zone, an immense and angular monolith of reinforced alloys and shimmering counterfields, the galaxy understood that humanity had made a new choice. It was a vessel unlike anything the alien empires had constructed, its silhouette a blend of brutal efficiency and elegant engineering. It carried no heraldic markings, no diplomatic insignia, no broadcasted warnings. It simply existed, a quiet titan whose arrival defied every prediction model. Its presence pulsed through the battlefield like a gravitational heartbeat. Destroyed hulks of Dominion carriers drifted across the void as silent witnesses. The remains of Citadel cruisers, shattered into metallic constellations, hung suspended in the frozen tableau of a war without victory. The battlefield had been locked in stalemate for years, neither side willing nor able to retreat, both too exhausted to advance. Their weapons had grown unimaginably destructive. Their tactics had evolved into a Darwinian competition of adaptation. Their casualties had reached numbers so vast that entire homeworlds mourned continuously without pause. And into this furnace of carnage, humanity sent a single warship. No accompanying fleet, no scouts, no carrier groups or escort wings. Just one vessel. Yet its arrival carried the weight of worlds. The ship's hull refracted light in impossible ways, bending visibility around it. Self as though reality hesitated to acknowledge its presence. Layered beneath the visible metal was an architecture of unknown technologies, hints of hybridized physics, dark energy stabilization mechanisms, quantum shield harmonics, and gravitational anchoring systems that defied existing classification. Alien observers watched in disbelief as the vessel countered gravitational stresses that should have destabilized lesser ships. Even the battlefield's dark matter turbulence, a residual side effect of centuries of weapons testing, seemed to diminish around it as though the warship's very existence imposed order upon chaos. The Citadel scientists who first intercepted the telemetry were so overwhelmed by the data that they recalibrated their instruments multiple times, certain that the readings reflected anomalies rather than engineered design. Dominion biostrategists, who consumed information with a near-instinctual hunger, sifted through the ship's energy signatures and concluded that the vessel's efficiency output was mathematically implausible. The warship radiated a disciplined confidence, as though every molecule had been positioned not merely for survival, but for supremacy. Within minutes, the silence of the battlefield deepened. Every vessel, friend, foe, autonomous, organic, ceased firing. Weapons that had screamed for decades suddenly withheld their fury. Engines that had roared with relentless determination quieted. Command centers that had been flooded with logistical updates, tactical alerts, and casualty feeds now found themselves staring at static or total operational standstill. Even the ever-present hum of background comm chatter, the white noise that defined life on the front lines, evaporated. An entire region of space held its breath. Because the ripples from the human warship's arrival were not merely gravitational, they were psychological. Empire after empire had witnessed the human species evolve from fragmented planetary factions into a unified stellar society. Humanity had endured global disasters, ecological collapse, kinetic bombardments, pandemics, economic implosions, rogue artificial intelligences, lunar infrastructural breakdowns, asteroid scares, and internal political crises. Yet through each catastrophe, humanity had found a way not just to recover, but to improve. Adaptation had become their defining trait. Where other civilizations advanced in predictable, linear increments, humanity advanced explosively, each crisis teaching them lessons they codified into doctrine, innovation, and culture. It was their ability to unify under pressure, to strategize when cornered, to experiment when outmatched, that had set them apart. Their resilience had no precedent. Their creativity knew no standard template. Their capacity to rebound from devastation approached mythic proportions. But the galaxy had never witnessed humanity's military capacity placed fully on display. Rumors had circulated, theories that humans rarely fought wars externally because they were too adept at fighting them internally. Stories of historical conflicts that showcased frightening levels of tactical ingenuity and brutal efficiency. Tales from exploratory fleets describing human combat drills that simulated scenarios other species deemed physically impossible. Yet rumors were one thing. Reality was another. The warship drifted forward, cutting through the debris field with a calm precision that made the battlefield tremble. Its engines emitted a resonance that harmonized with the vacuum itself, a low-frequency hum that traveled across hull plating, sensor grids, and biological nervous systems. Every being who heard it felt an ancient instinct stir, an instinct that whispered that humanity had arrived not as spectators, but as a deciding force. The vessel's motion was unhurried, yet there was nothing uncertain about its trajectory. It moved like a predator entering a hunting ground it had studied for far too long. The psychological effect rippled outward. Dominion warforms recalculated their attack pathways, but found each projected route collapsing into failure. Citadel commanders examined potential defensive positions, but discovered none that offered meaningful resistance. The warship's strategic placement alone was altering the probabilities of the entire battle. This was the moment the galaxy realized that humanity had not entered the war to participate. They had entered to end it. The question that haunted every commander was simple and terrifying. Why now? Humanity had been silent observers for decades, watching from a distance as the Citadel and Dominion tore entire sectors apart. They had offered humanitarian support, but had avoided military entanglements. Their reluctance had been interpreted as pacifism or naivety or a lack of readiness. But now, the truth revealed itself in the most overwhelming way possible. Their reluctance had not been born of fear. It had been a matter of preparat. Humanity had watched the galaxy wage war and had learned from every violent encounter, every flawed strategy, every botched ceasefire, every catastrophic escalation. They had studied how empires collapsed under their own hubris. They had mapped out how alliances fractured under pressure. They had analyzed the Dominion's swarm logic and understood its patterns. They had deconstructed the Citadel's hierarchical inefficiencies and its reliance on outdated traditions. Humanity had not turned away from the war because it lacked the will to act. It had waited for the moment when action would matter most. On the ruined battlefield, the warship reached its position. Its arrival triggered secondary pulses across thousands of monitoring stations. Advanced identification sequences activated across alien networks, each trying to decipher who or what the vessel represented. But the codes returned no declarations of allegiance, no military threat analysis, no diplomatic channels. What the galaxy received instead was a single, universal data ping, an encoded signature that confirmed the vessel's origin without revealing its intent. It simply stated that humanity was present. The inside of every Citadel and Dominion warship reacted to that signal differently. Citadel crews, indoctrinated in the belief that knowledge must be shared, forwarded the data through their networks in a surge of bureaucratic panic. Dominion swarm ships absorbed the signal like a predator sniffing the air, considering its implications in a quiet but intense biological computation. Across the galaxy, countless worlds paused their routines as analysts, strategists, scientists, and leaders tried to interpret the meaning behind humanity's sudden entry into the war's bloodiest theater. The battlefield, once a cacophony of destruction, became a stage of anticipation. Humanity's warship did not power its weapons. It did not activate shields. It did not deploy drones, fighters, or secondary craft. It simply existed, its presence alone enough to disrupt centuries of violence. It carried itself with the composure of a civilization that had already calculated the entire battle thousands of different ways and had chosen the optimal path before taking its first step into the arena. This was the composure of a species that understood the stakes. Humanity had watched war define the galaxy, an endless cycle of destruction, reprisal, and desperation. And perhaps humanity, forged in its own trials, had recognized that this war was approaching a breaking point, a point where the galaxy could collapse under the weight of its rivalries, a point where the wrong weapon, the wrong decision, the wrong retaliation could ignite a chain reaction that extinguished civilizations wholesale. Humanity had come to the battlefield not as conquerors, not as opportunists, but as something far more unsettling to the established powers. They had come as arbiters. A tremor passed through the debris field as the warship deployed a single, silent apparatus, a structure that unfolded from its underbelly like a mechanical flower blooming in slow, deliberate precision. It extended panels crafted from alien alloys woven with human ingenuity. It emitted a soft radiance that refracted against the approaching starlight. Dominion swarm ships retreated instinctively. Citadel watchers observed with scientific awe and existential fear. The device was unfamiliar to all, except to humanity. For humanity knew what it had built and what it was about to do. The silence deepened as the apparatus activated, and the battlefield waited, every faction, every soldier, every mind bracing for whatever came next from the species that had survived everything it had endured. Humanity had made its entrance, and the galaxy trembled. The device humanity deployed drifted beneath the warship like a quiet omen, its metal surfaces shimmering with layered complexities that eluded alien comprehension. It appeared deceptively delicate, its unfolding plates and geometric limbs bending as though responding to a choreography only humanity understood. Yet every empire observing sensed that the construct embodied more than technology. It embodied decision. It embodied judgment. It embodied the irreversible shift humanity had chosen to make. As the device stabilized, a pulse of low-frequency energy rippled outward, carried through vacuum as an oscillation across quantum fields. It resonated not as a weapon, but as a presence, something that seeped into sensors, neural implants, biological instincts, and the core routines of artificial intelligences. Dominion swarm ships recoiled, their collective biological intelligence sensing a threat that defied the patterns they had catalogued. Citadel tacticians stared into their hollow projections and saw their meticulously curated data streams distort around the anomaly. Even the automated battlefield monitoring platforms, systems designed to operate without fear or interpretatio, registered the device as an object of unprecedented categorization. Humanity had introduced something new into the theater of war. Yet they offered no explanation. The unknown became a force of its own, sweeping through the ranks of every faction. Dominion warriors, bred for purpose and conditioned for submission to their swarm sovereign, felt a strange, disquiet ripple through their synaptic lattices. Their biology had always been honed for efficient brutality, guided by an instinctual hunger to expand, conquer, consume. But now their instincts were disrupted, replaced by a faint, unfamiliar tremor, curiosity, wariness. A primal reluctance to confront the entity that had just entered their domain. The Citadel forces, with their long histories of diplomacy and science, found themselves paralyzed between fear and fascination. Their civilizations had long prided themselves on their intellectual superiority, their mastery of galactic jurisprudence, their towering academies and libraries that archived millennia of accumulated knowledge. But all their studies failed to explain how humanity, so distant from the central galactic stage, had developed technology that could manipulate the battlefield's fabric with such casual elegance. All that was known was that the apparatus had a purpose, and humanity had committed to seeing it through. For a moment, nothing happened. The battlefield remained frozen. Wreckage drifted untouched through the silent void. Flashes of distant stars shimmered across the shattered remains of war. The silence deepened to the point where it felt physical, as though the vacuum itself had grown dense with anticipation. The galaxy's eyes, organic, synthetic, and hybrid, fixed upon the human warship and the enigma suspended beneath it. And then the device began to change the shape of space. Not through destructive force, but through subtle, layered manipulation. A lattice of light expanded outward, forming a spherical field whose boundaries rippled like a heat haze. Observers saw stars warp through the distortion, their positions bending fluidly across the projection. Dominion sensory constructs panicked as their targeting arrays lost focus, unable to define the boundaries of the anomaly. Citadel researchers scrambled to interpret the flickering quantum emissions, discovering patterns that resembled a hybrid of gravitational calibration and temporal anchoring. Humanity had not deployed a weapon. They had deployed a domain. A controlled region of space shaped by human physics, physics that had evolved under duress, sculpted by centuries of catastrophic experimentation, desperation-driven innovation, and the relentless pursuit of survival. For human technology had never progressed through abundance. It had progressed through emergency, through necessity, through crisis. Every great advancement had been forged at the precipice of disaster, as though humanity required the shadow of extinction to push the edge of possibility. Inside the expanding sphere, the laws of the battlefield began to rewrite themselves. Weapons that had charged their next devastating volley found their capacitors draining harmlessly. Dominion bioplasma sacs that had pulsed with destructive energy felt their internal chemistry calm, as though lulled by an unknown frequency. Citadel rail cannons that had been primed for retaliatory fire saw their magnetic coils deactivate in perfect unison. Even the automated drones and autonomous strike ships, machines free of emotion, ceased their aggression as their targeting algorithms rewrote themselves under the sphere's influence. It became clear that humanity had come not to escalate the war, but to halt it. Yet the method they used was unlike anything the galaxy had witnessed, for they did not impose peace through negotiation or surrender. They imposed stillness, not through force, but through dominance, through a mastery over physics that rendered all conflict inert. Humanity had not sought permission to reshape the battlefield. They had simply done so with an authority that suggested not arrogance, but responsibility. Still, the silence that followed was not peaceful. It was a silence of friction, of unresolved rage and restless purpose. Dominion forces, though subdued, pulsed with an instinctual drive to resume their advance. Citadel forces, though momentarily freed from the storm of war, felt a profound uncertainty sink into their ranks. What humanity had done was miraculous, but miracles were rarely free of consequence. Across the galaxy, analysts and leaders began re-evaluating everything they knew about the human species. They recalled humanity's rapid ascent through technological eras that had taken other civilizations centuries. They studied their records of catastrophic wars, conflicts waged with terrifying ingenuity and staggering creativity. They examined their cultural history, filled with stories of tenacity, rebellion, scientific triumph, mythic endurance. A deeply ingrained refusal to accept defeat. Humanity had endured repeated cycles of destruction, yet each time emerged stronger, smarter, more unified. Where other species saw trauma as a wound, humans saw it as a lesson. Where others grew cautious after suffering, humans grew inventive. Where others retreated, humans advanced. Now this tendency had culminated in the warship and the device, a manifestation of everything humanity had learned from its own turbulent evolution. And though the galaxy marveled at the technological prowess, what unsettled them most was the underlying truth. Humanity had watched this war long enough to know that neither side deserved victory. Their intervention had nothing to do with conquest. It had everything to do with correction. The battlefield remained suspended in enforced stillness, and within that stillness, memories of humanity's past burned like distant fires. Fires no alien witness had ever seen, but whose echoes shaped every decision humans now made. Long before humanity reached the stars, they had learned the catastrophic cost of unending conflict. Their homeworld had endured eras where peace seemed impossible. Nations had risen and fallen through storms of war. Technologies meant to safeguard humanity had been twisted into tools of devastation. Yet each disaster had driven them toward unity rather than annihilation. Humans had built institutions designed to prevent their extinction. They had constructed networks of knowledge, treaties, and shared responsibility that survived even when governments crumbled. They had learned that power without purpose was ruin, and that survival required cooperation. This hard-earned wisdom now reached across the galaxy through the actions of a single warship. Humanity had not come to take sides. They had come to impose perspective. As the sphere stabilized, its inner turbulence smoothing into a vast, shimmering dome, observers saw light refracting along its surface in synchronized pulses. The patterns resembled intricate waveforms, signals dense with meaning yet unreadable to any non-human mind. Hidden within those waveforms lay the human strategy, a multi-layered mesh of gravitational filters, temporal dampening fields, energy siphon sequences, and predictive modeling grids. Together, they created a controlled environment where violence could not escalate. Humanity had weaponized peace. The Dominion swarm sovereign, wherever it lay coiled deep within its hive world, felt a tremor ripple through its vast neural consciousness. It sensed threat, not in the form of prey or predator, but in the form of something that could unravel the swarm's evolutionary purpose. Dominion biology thrived on adaptable warfare, on transforming conflict into expansion. But the human field negated adaptation itself, forcing the swarm into a rare and disorienting state: impotence. The Citadel High Council, scattered across its many fortified towers, felt a different fear, a fear not of destruction, but of irrelevance. Their bureaucratic frameworks, their diplomatic alliances, their philosophical doctrines had never accounted for a species capable of dictating the terms of an entire battlefield with such quiet authority. Humanity's presence threatened to dismantle centuries of political maneuvering in a single, silent gesture. Yet neither side could challenge the warship. The device radiated an aura of inevitability. It felt as though the field it generated reached not only through space, but through time, echoing a message that resonated with ancient human truth: conflict must serve purpose, or it must end. Those who witnessed the unfolding event sensed that humanity's intentions stretched beyond mere interference. They sensed calculation behind every pulse of the field. Humanity had not acted impulsively. They had watched. They had analyzed. They had chosen their moment with surgical precision. And now they prepared to do something far greater than enforce a ceasefire. They prepared to alter the course of the war. Slowly, the sphere expanded further, its boundaries pushing the debris field aside with gentle, inevitable pressure. Disabled weapons drifted harmlessly to its edges. Warships suspended in stalemate found themselves gently repositioned. The field reshaped the battlefield as though clearing a canvas, preparing to draw a new picture upon it. Humanity was preparing to illustrate their message, not with words, but with action. The galaxy understood that this intervention was only the beginning. The warship's presence was not the culmination of human strategy, but the first step. Observers felt a rising certainty that humanity had come equipped not merely with machines, but with a plan, one forged through generations of resilience, refined through countless crises, and tested under conditions no alien species had endured. The true purpose of the apparatus remained unknown, but its activation revealed a deeper truth. Humanity had no intention of allowing the galaxy to decide its own fate through endless violence. Humanity would decide instead. The sphere reached its final expansion, its surface shimmering with perfect geometric curvature. Inside, all motion ceased. Even the chaotic drift of debris settled into quiet suspension. Time itself seemed to slow, though no measurable temporal distortion could be confirmed. The stillness felt absolute, as if humanity had carved a sanctuary inside the void, one where the laws of war no longer applied. That sanctuary was not built for comfort. It was built for judgment. For in the heart of the sphere, beneath the shadow of the human warship, the galaxy's most enduring question now awaited an answer. What does humanity intend to do next? And the battlefield trembled as it waited. In the suspended stillness of the human-forged sphere, the galaxy found itself trapped within a moment stretched across eternity. The battlefield that had once roared with relentless carnage now hovered in perfect equilibrium, as though the universe itself had paused to bear witness. Within the unnatural calm, the human warship remained motionless, a monolith of purpose whose every contour reflected the weight of a species that had endured, adapted, and outlasted extinctions, shadow more times than history bothered to record. Yet the galaxy had seen only the beginning of humanity's intent. The sphere's shimmering boundary held more than the prevention of violence. It held the promise of transformation. And as the apparatus beneath the warship shifted once more, revealing deeper layers of its design, a silent ripple of foreboding swept through the entire region. It was not fear in the traditional sense. It was something older, more primal, a recognition that events had passed beyond the sphere of collective control. Humanity now dictated the terms. The apparatus began to realign, plates folded inward, crystalline panels reoriented, and a series of concentric rings detached from their central housing. They drifted outward in a slow, deliberate pattern, forming a tri-layered structure that encircled the heart of the device. Each ring pulsed with synchronized oscillations, mapping invisible pathways into a pattern that resembled cosmic architecture, blueprints for something far beyond mere military engineering. Observers across the galaxy strained to interpret the phenomenon. Dominion sensory organisms probed the shifting frequencies, their bioalgorithms attempting to decode the intent behind the expanding rings. They sensed neither aggression nor retreat. Instead, they detected a pattern that suggested analysis. Humanity was studying the battlefield at a depth no foreign empire had ever attempted. They dissected the war's anatomy, its gravitational scars, its energy signatures, its collateral entropy, and the very resonance of death embedded within the void. Citadel strategists recognized elements of environmental reconstruction protocols, albeit at a scale and precision unmatched by any known civilization. The apparatus wasn't simply halting violence, it was reading the memory of the battlefield. Every destroyed vessel, every severed hull, every floating remnant of war carried imprints of the past. Humanity had found a way to access those imprints, examining the conflict with a clarity that bordered on omniscience. They were not just stopping the war. They were understanding it. Humanity's decision to enter the Orion conflict had not arisen from impulse. It had emerged from a long, quiet study of galactic behavior. Humanity had observed how the Dominion swarm's aggression stemmed not from malice, but from a biological imperative coded into countless generations of predatory evolution. They had watched how the Citadel armadas, though technologically refined and strategically disciplined, had allowed their ancient bureaucracies to calcify, reducing their adaptability in prolonged conflict. They had analyzed how other neutral factions contributed through proxy networks, resource funneling, and covert sabotage. The war had persisted not because either side was righteous or wrong. It had persisted because the galaxy had grown accustomed to conflict without resolution. Humanity had come to break that cycle. As the rings expanded, the sphere's interior underwent subtle transformation. Light refracted in new geometric patterns. The frozen debris began drifting toward predetermined positions, guided by gravitational currents too delicate for alien sensors to register. Destroyed hull fragments arranged themselves into arrays of varying density. Energy traces from long-spent weapons condensed into visible threads. The battlefield reorganized itself under human control, as if the war's entire history was being reassembled. The galaxy watched as humanity constructed a map, not of territory, but of consequence. The apparatus projected a vast lattice of intersecting paths, each representing the trajectory the war had taken and the paths it could have taken. It became clear that humanity's design was not tactical, it was educational. It depicted the conflict as a living organism, shaped by choices, failures, instincts, and inertia. Through this reconstruction, the galaxy witnessed its own reflection, and the image was unsettling. For the first time, the Dominions saw the waste their adaptive hunger had inflicted. The Citadel saw how its rigid systems had allowed the war to stagnate. Free world coalitions observed how they had profited from chaos without contributing to stability. Independent mercenary sectors saw their roles as catalysts of unnecessary destruction. Humanity had aimed a mirror at the stars. The lesson was unmistakable. The war had never been about survival. It had been about blindness. And now, humanity intended to open the galaxy's eyes. As the apparatus continued its work, the sphere's boundaries began absorbing data from every ship, every wreck, every drifting artifact. Dominion organisms felt their memories probed at a cellular level, ancestral instincts laid bare before an intelligence that understood predation far too well. Citadel command structures felt the weight of their historical archives gently sifted by analytical systems designed to find the truth behind institutional failure. Even autonomous war forms, whose cold logic had once shielded them from introspection, felt their processes examined. Humanity was not judging the galaxy. Humanity was learning how to save it. Within the sphere, the war was dissected not as a clash of powers, but as a symptom of a deeper imbalance. Humanity had become familiar with imbalance, had lived through it, suffered under it, and reshaped their society to survive it. They recognized that cycles of destruction were self-perpetuating unless confronted with deliberate intervention. This battlefield had become the stage for that intervention. Yet the next phase brought something far more dramatic. The tri-layered rings that encircled the apparatus began to spin. Slowly at first, then with increasing momentum. Each rotation emitted harmonic waves that spread evenly through the sphere. These waves did not disrupt, they clarified. Debris solidified into coherent structures. Memory imprints sharpened into vivid forms. Energy trails aligned into pathways that reflected the emotions, intentions, and desperation that had fueled the war. The galaxy realized with mounting awe that humanity was building a historical reconstruction of the entire conflict in real time, at a fidelity no known civilization had ever achieved. They were creating an indisputable truth, a truth written not in political rhetoric or strategic summaries, but in the raw footprint of every action committed on this battlefield. Humanity was preparing to reveal what the war truly was. For within the expanding lattice, figures took shape, not literal beings, but representations of forces, choices, and consequences. Dominion expansion roots appeared as branching tendrils of survival instinct and evolutionary momentum. Citadel defense lines manifested as rigid geometric walls depicting their cultural reliance on structure and order. Every escalation, every reprisal, every misunderstanding, and every missed opportunity glowed as points of light within the reconstruction. It was not a condemnation. It was a narrative. One humanity intended the galaxy to understand. As the reconstruction neared completion, a shift in the sphere's atmosphere signaled the next stage. The rings slowed. The apparatus retracted its scanning limbs. The lattice, now fully formed, pulsed with a rhythm that felt like the closing of a chapter. And then, in a moment that reverberated across the void, the apparatus initiated the second phase of humanity's intervention. Space inside the sphere began to heal. It was subtle at first, a faint shimmer that moved across the suspended debris. Metallurgical fractures closed with molecular precision. Burned hull plating regained its reflective structure. Damaged Dominion bioforms, suspended in stasis, experienced cellular regeneration along pathways that had been disrupted. Citadel technology restored its systems without activating weapons. Even the battlefield's gravitational scars began to smooth. Humanity was not only reconstructing history, they were repairing the future. This act alone sent shockwaves through every observing faction, for to repair a battlefield was to challenge the very concept of war. It erased entropy, it denied destruction its permanence. It reversed the fundamental truth that violence leaves wounds that cannot be undone. But humanity had always defied inevitability. The galaxy could not fathom the cost of this restoration, nor the technological mastery required to perform it at such scale. Yet humanity's choice to rebuild rather than destroy spoke volumes. They had no interest in humiliating the warring factions. They sought instead to demonstrate why T could exist when survival was not defined through dominance. The healing continued until the battlefield resembled a pristine canvas, ships intact, systems disabled but unharmed, debris reformed into original structures, the void cleansed of violent residue. The war, for a moment, seemed as though it had never happened. It was then that the apparatus enacted its final revelation. With a resonance that rippled across the sphere's boundary, the reconstruction shifted. The map of past and present altered itself, displaying future projections, scenarios of escalating conflict, potential extinction events, cascading failures of galactic infrastructure. The images depicted a galaxy spiraling toward irreversible collapse if the Dominion and Citadel continued their centuries-old cycle. It also displayed alternative futures, ones shaped by cooperation, joint reconstruction, shared scientific innovation, and unified security protocols. Futures that no single empire could achieve alone. Futures that required a fundamental shift in the galaxy's understanding of strength. Humanity had seen this crossroads many times before, and they had survived by choosing unity. The message of the reconstruction was undeniable. If the galaxy continued its destructive path, it would not survive the next great crisis. But if it embraced cooperation, it could evolve beyond its limitations. Humanity had not come to conquer or to command. They had come to guide. For in the heart of the sphere, the warship finally moved. Not as a threat, but as a sign. The galaxy had been shown what was. It had been shown what could be. And now it needed to decide which future it would choose. The battlefield trembled once more, not from fear, but from awakening. Humanity had taken the war and stripped it of its illusions. What came next would change the stars forever. In the restored quiet of the sphere, where a battlefield reborn drifted with a serenity it had never known, the galaxy felt the weight of possibility for the first time in generations. The human warship hovered at the sphere's core like a sentinel of judgment, its silhouette sharp against the lattice of reconstructed histories and projected destinies. No weapons were raised, no threats were issued. Humanity stood with the calmness of a species that had endured enough catastrophe to understand that endings could be rewritten. Yet the stillness carried tension, tension born from the realization that humanity had not finished shaping the battlefield, nor had they finished shaping the minds of those who watched. Alien fleets, though immobilized by the field's elegant pressure, felt the gravity of change gathering like a storm. Dominion warbeasts sensed a shift in the evolutionary ladder itself, as though some unseen force was rearranging the rules of survival. Citadel vessels felt an ideological quake ripple through their hulls, an intuition that their ancient doctrines were being weighed against a new standard they had never imagined. Humanity had shown the galaxy the consequences of its past and the branching roads of its future. Now humanity prepared to reveal the path it intended the galaxy to walk. The apparatus beneath the warship activated once more. Its rings, which had slowed into near stillness, began rotating in alternating directions. Each ring moved with such precision that even quantum fluctuations bowed around them. The rotations created a subtle hum, not one of sound, but a vibration woven into the fabric of space. The hum carried an unmistakable sensation. The battlefield was entering its next transformation. Within the sphere, remnants of reconstructed history dissolved into streams of light. The once crystalline shapes unraveled into data currents that spiraled upward toward the warship. The past, once displayed in luminous detail, folded back into human systems for deeper evaluation. The future projections dimmed into waiting silhouettes. What remained was a blank expanse, an unmarred void without debris, without scars, without the residue of conflict. Humanity had created a clean slate, not as an erasure of what was, but as the foundation for what must come next. The warship began to emit a low, steady resonance. The frequency was unique, alien in texture yet unmistakably purposeful. It reached into the molecular structure of every vessel trapped within the sphere. Dominion bioforms stiffened under its influence, their instinctive aggression pacified not through suppression, but through alignment with the field's harmonic. Citadel's sensory chambers detected a stabilizing force that tempered anxiety and replaced it with clarity. The resonance triggered a slow awakening across the fleets. For the first time in centuries, all combatants felt unburdened by the gravitational pull of war. It was then that humanity initiated the second reconstruction. Above the warship, fragments of data condensed into a new shape, this time not a map of the past or a project. Iron of potential futures, but a blueprint. It appeared as a massive, multi-layered construct spanning kilometers, built of light and gravitational architecture. Its edges glowed with a soft luminescence, outlining patterns that none of the observing species recognized. Yet its purpose was unmistakable. Humanity was presenting a design for something the galaxy had never achieved: a unified defensive and cooperative infrastructure spanning multiple civilizations, a system built to ensure that no war, no matter its scale or origin, could engulf the stars again. The structure's outer framework depicted stabilized trade corridors, synchronized communication grids, emergency response fleets composed of multi-species cooperation, and resource networks designed to eliminate scarcity-based conflict. Its core layers displayed diplomatic mechanisms enforced by a neutral arbiter, something humanity seemingly intended to become or to help establish. At the center of the projection lay the most shocking component: a pangalactic crisis response force composed of representatives from every major civilization. A force that would operate not under domination, but under mutual survival. A force that could face extinction-level threats, not with division, but with unified purpose. Humanity had not merely come to stop a war. They had come to present a new blueprint for galactic civilization. As the projection rotated in silent grandeur, alien fleets scrutinized its structure through lenses of fear, awe, skepticism, and wonder. Dominion strategists recognized how such a structure threatened their expansionist instincts, forcing their predatory evolution into a new paradigm, one where cooperation was not a weakness, but a necessity. Citadel leaders analyzed pathways that would streamline their outdated governance mechanisms, offering unprecedented efficiency and stability. Humanity did not wait for approval. The apparatus released a gravitational pulse that traveled through the sphere, imprinting the blueprint as a persistent holographic display suspended across the void. The projection would remain visible until the galaxy understood it, until they accepted the truth written into its core. Survival demanded unity. The next phase began with the warship sending out a series of pulses across the sphere. They were delicate, yet carried the power to reshape matter. Each pulse held instructions, replicating fragments of the projection into smaller, comprehensible structures near each alien vessel. These fragments displayed the exact role each species could play in the new galactic design. Humanity had studied the strengths and weaknesses of every civilization and placed them where they would not only survive, but thrive. Dominion adaptations were repurposed for border defense and biosphere restoration. Citadel intelligence and diplomacy were integrated as the backbone of unified governance. Neutral systems, long isolated or opportunistic, were assigned roles as stabilizing agents. Autonomous warforms were redirected toward infrastructure fortification, their precision and efficiency given purpose beyond destruction. What humanity had built was not a hierarchy. It was a constellation, each species a necessary star. And at the center lay humanity itself, not as rulers, but as the ones willing to shoulder the burden of neutrality, the ones who had learned, through centuries of calamity, how to lead without conquest. The reaction across the fleets was complex. Dominion organisms sensed evolutionary disruption, an invitation to transcend their violent origins. Citadel ships detected the dissolution of their centuries-old political stagnation. Independent factions sensed opportunity, prosperity, and stability beyond anything war had ever offered. The galaxy understood that humanity was offering not dominance, but transcendence. Yet the proposal alone was not enough. The galaxy needed proof, something tangible to demonstrate that cooperation was not idealistic fantasy, but survival's next evolution. Humanity had anticipated this. The apparatus beneath the warship activated its deepest layer. A radiant burst of structured energy illuminated the sphere. From the center outward, it expanded into a vast simulation, one that projected the galaxy's future if this new order was embraced. This time, the projection displayed not war, but resilience, species working together to repel cosmic anomalies, joint fleets stopping asteroid impacts before they breached inhabited sectors, shared energy networks preventing planetary infrastructure collapse, scientific coalitions curing plagues, stabilizing stars, terraforming dead worlds into new homes. The simulation showed a galaxy transformed. It showed a future worth surviving for. Then the projection shifted once more. This time, it displayed the alternative. Should unity be rejected, the galaxy's path would descend into fragmentation. Wars would multiply, resources would dwindle, autonom. O's weapons would proliferate beyond control. Biospheres would collapse under strategic bombardments. Star systems would fall into apocalyptic isolation. And in the end, some distant cosmic threat, an unpredicted force of nature or an evolving predator, would arrive to find a galaxy weakened beyond salvation. Humanity had spelled out the truth. Division guaranteed extinction. Unity guaranteed evolution. Within the sphere, even the vacuum felt charged with revelation. Then came the final stage of humanity's demonstration, a stage no civilization anticipated. The warship disengaged the apparatus and redirected its enormous power toward the sphere's boundary. The shimmering field that had contained the battlefield began to pulse. Energy cascaded along its curvature, focusing toward a single point that glowed brighter and brighter. The galaxy braced, uncertain whether humanity was about to unleash something equivalent to a supernova. Instead, the field opened. Not outward, but inward, revealing a swirling vortex of space-time at the sphere's heart. It resembled neither weapon nor collapse. It resembled opportunity. The vortex displayed coordinates, not of a battlefield, but of a hidden system humanity had discovered far beyond known space. A system rich in life-sustaining worlds, untouched resources, and stable cosmic conditions. Humanity offered it freely. It was the galaxy's inheritance, should it choose unity. The message was clear. There was more in the universe worth exploring, worth protecting, worth becoming, but only together. The vortex pulsed, waiting. The galaxy stared into possibility. Humanity had laid out the road. The next step belonged to everyone else. Across the immobilized fleets, a realization spread like dawn. Humanity had not come to end the war. They had come to reshape history. And the battlefield trembled at the magnitude of what came next. The sphere remained suspended in perfect equilibrium around the restored battlefield, glowing with the gentle radiance of a new beginning. Inside its shimmering walls drifted fleets that had once raged with hatred, now forced to confront the weight of everything humanity had revealed. The Dominion felt evolution itself fracturing beneath the pressure of change. The Citadel sensed their ancient doctrines dissolving under the gravity of revelation. Independent factions, mercenary clans, rogue sectors, and quiet observer civilizations across the galaxy watched from afar as the greatest turning point in recorded history unfolded in absolute silence. And humanity waited. The warship did not move. It did not raise shields or deploy weapons. It did not demand obedience or radiate superiority. It simply remained, an immovable axis around which destiny now turned. In that stillness, every thought, every fear, every hope cast its shadow across the galaxy's heart. For humanity had shown them the shape of the future. Now the galaxy had to decide whether to accept it. The vortex remained open at the sphere's center, its swirling expanse revealing a glimpse of untouched horizons, a system overflowing with unclaimed potential, worlds that had never known war or exploitation, resources that could end scarcity across countless empires, a sanctuary not reserved for a conqueror, but offered to the galaxy as a whole, a gift beyond comprehension. But even a gift required acceptance. The fleets trembled with the weight of indecision. Species that had once fought with unbreakable ferocity now drifted in a paralysis born from awe. Dominion war beasts, designed to adapt to any threat, found themselves confronting something evolution had never prepared them for, an alternative to endless predation. Citadel warships, steeped in centuries of rigid protocol, sensed the collapse of a doctrine that had guided them since before their earliest histories. Independent systems, long profiteers of chaos, realized that stability offered an opportunity far greater than conflict. Yet none dared move. Not out of fear, but out of reverence. Because humanity had made it unmistakably clear that this was not their battlefield. This was their message. As the fleets hung in that silent limbo, the human apparatus initiated its final protocol. A soft luminescence flowed through the sphere like a rising tide. It washed over every vessel, every hull, every living organism and synthetic intelligence. The glow was neither invasive nor aggressive. Instead, it carried the essence of something profoundly human, an echo of resilience, a whisper of hope, a memory of survival through darkest night. The glow revealed the truth humanity had always known. Unity was not an ideal, it was a necessity. The luminance intensified, revealing the invisible network now linking every vessel within the sphere. It was not a mind control mechanism, nor a coercive device. It was something far more sophisticated, a shared environmental simulation that displayed with perfect fidelity the consequence ease of each possible choice the galaxy could make. Not through words, not through threats, but through lived experience. Dominion organisms felt, for the first time, the devastation their unchecked expansion would eventually bring upon themselves. They experienced the genetic bottlenecks, the resource collapses, the internal fragmentation that awaited them. And they experienced the alternative, a path where their adaptive brilliance was used to restore ecosystems, defend galactic borders, and thrive without slaughter. Citadel minds felt the limitations of their bureaucracy, the stagnation, the inefficiency, the fractures hidden beneath centuries of self-assured pride. They saw their future decline through inaction, and they saw how their diplomatic clarity and organizational genius could unify species that had never known cooperation. Independent factions felt the fleeting nature of profit harvested from instability. They sensed how their fractured existence ensured they would be the first casualties of any future cosmic threat. And they sensed the wealth, security, and legacy they could gain through joining a galactic cooperative with limitless reach. The sphere let every species feel its own future. And for the first time in recorded history, the galaxy understood the cost of refusing evolution. Humanity had not come to choose for them. Humanity had come to force them to see the truth. The light dimmed, leaving behind silence, not oppressive but contemplative, a silence of awakening. The warship shifted at last. Not to move, not to fire, but to rise. Slowly, with the grace of a titan lifting itself from the cradle of history, the warship ascended above the apparatus. Its hull caught the radiance of the vortex, reflecting it across the sphere in a cascade of shimmering light. It looked less like a vessel of war and more like a monument, a testament to everything humanity had survived and everything they now stood to protect. The galaxy saw not a conqueror, but a guardian, a species that had clawed its way through extinction's shadow, a civilization forged through relentless adversity, disaster after disaster, conflict after conflict, each hardship carving something stronger and wiser from the fractures left behind. Humanity had not risen because it dominated others. Humanity had risen because it refused to break. The warship's radiance intensified until it illuminated the entire sphere. The fleets felt it. The galaxy felt it. The universe, for one brief moment, felt humanity's truth. Humanity had not come to rewrite the galaxy. Humanity had come to help it rise. The sphere pulsed once, an immense heartbeat that echoed across the void. That was the signal. A pulse of release energy rippled out from the warship, expanding across the sphere. Gravitational locks dissolved, stasis fields unraveled, weapon systems, still dormant, were gently disconnected from the sphere's harmonic suppression. Engines hummed back to life. Biological organisms regained full motor control. Synthetic minds reactivated their processes. But none moved. None fired. None retreated. And the warship remained perfectly, unbearably still. Because the final choice was not humanity's. It was the galaxy's. Across the fleets, instincts warred with reason. Ancient rivalries trembled beneath newly formed clarity. The Dominion felt aggression stir beneath their skin, but now it was tempered by understanding. Evolution could mean transformation, not destruction. The Citadel felt the weight of their authority, now challenged by the undeniable truth that knowledge alone was not enough. They needed courage to change. Independent ships felt the flicker of fear dissolve as hope took its place. The vortex pulsed again. The future stood open. And at last, the galaxy moved. Not toward the vortex, not toward war, but toward humanity. One ship shifted its trajectory, an unassuming Citadel frigate whose engines flickered uncertainly as it drifted closer to the warship. Not as a challenge, not as surrender, but as acknowledgement, a symbolic gesture they had understood. Then another ship followed. Then another. A Dominion cruiser drifted forward, its biological plating shimmering under the sphere's light. Then more joined. Independent craft followed in small clusters, drawn by the gravity of a future they had never dared to imagine. The fleets were not aligning in formation. They were aligning in unity, not under domination, under evolution. The human warship accepted their approach with the stillness of a mountain. It offered no approval, no praise, no reprimand. Humanity had never demanded reverence. They demanded responsibility. One by one, the fleets positioned themselves around the warship. Dominion beside Citadel, mercenary vessels beside peacekeeping frigates. Species that had slaughtered each other for centuries now drifted in peace. Humanity had achieved the impossible, not through power, through clarity. The sphere responded with a final pulse, dissolving its boundaries into cascading particles of light. The restored battlefield remained pristine. The vortex closed gently, its purpose complete. The apparatus folded back into the warship's underside, its rings locking into dormant harmony. The demonstration had ended. The transformation had begun. As the sphere vanished, the fleets remained. They no longer faced each other as enemies. They faced the warship. They faced the species that had shown them a new shape for the galaxy. And in that silent, monumental moment, a new era dawned, one forged not from conquest, but cooperation. Humanity activated its engines. But it did not leave. It ascended above the fleets, rising like a lighthouse in a dark sea. Its radiant hull ignited the void. In its wake, it left no threat, no command, no notification. Only purpose. For the galaxy now understood. Humanity would not rule. Humanity would lead. And as the warship soared into the vast tapestry of stars, the galaxy rose behind it, not as fractured empires, but as a unified civilization preparing to meet the future together. The battlefield, once a symbol of endless conflict, became the birthplace of a new galactic age. The galaxy fell silent once more. But this time, the silence was not born of fear. It was born of hope. Humanity's warship departed. The galaxy followed. And the stars trembled, not from war, but from the beginning of something greater than any civilization had ever dared to dream. The age of unity had begun.